Let's talk about stories. Now, human memory, frankly, isn't that great. Sometimes you need a little help. Now, as a professional, especially as a leader, you need to use a communication vehicle that's going to allow people to remember what you're trying to say. Maybe nothing is better than a story in that regard. For example, take employee motivation, seeing people as individuals and trying to understand how to motivate them to be as productive as possible. I could go two routes there. One, as a social scientist, I could quote research. I could give you names and dates and tell you theories and prove I'm intellectual and try to explain all the research. Maybe you'd learn something. Definitely you'd be bored. I could do the research route, or I could tell you a story. Let me give you an example about employee motivation, seeing people as individuals from a story perspective instead of a dry quoting the research and numbers perspective. My telephone rings one day, I pick up the phone, and it was a president of a firm in the Midwest who will go unnamed. He said, I got your name from so-and-so, and I was going to invite you out and talk to you about some employee motivation problems I've got and see what your thoughts are. I said, wonderful. So I show up at this guy's office, I sit down and we start talking, and I began just by asking him things you're doing to try and recognize and reward your employees. And he went through a pretty long litany of things that they've tried and then stopped because they really didn't work that well. He said, we tried this, but it didn't work. We tried that, but it didn't work. And he finally got to something, he said, that worked wonderfully. There's one thing we do that everyone loves. And I was happy that he finally got to that place. And I said, tell me what it is. And like a proud father, he said, well, we have this quarterly meeting, and I usually get up on stage, and after talking about the firm, I bring up some high achievers from the quarter, and I give them something. I said, great, what do you give them? And he said, I give them a ham. He was very proud. And it sounded odd to me, but I did my best to stay composed, and I just gathered myself, and I looked at him very respectfully, and I said, how's that ham thing working for you? And he proudly tells me that this is the most positive shared thing in the whole organization. I said, hey, good for you. Then let me go do my job. And I left and I did a survey and some focus groups and talked to some people over by the water cooler. Now let me ask you, what do you think I learned about the ham scheme? Probably what you'd guess. This was a source of ridicule. Biggest shared joke in the entire organization. First leadership lesson, you ready? The leader who hired me, the president of this firm, meaningfully unaware of that reality. He thought it was such a winner. Everyone else thought it was a complete loser. Next big employee meeting rolls around in the quarter. He gets up on stage and he gives the results. He does the tap dance, all the things he usually does, and then he brings up the people who had been awarded or nominated as employee of the quarter. That day he gave out 3 hams. 3 wonderful people received hams yet again. I'm sitting in the back of the auditorium and I'm doing what I do, which is to read people. I read nonverbals like most people read words. And what I was watching that day was a nonverbal train wreck. Mr. President was smiling, graciously handing out the hams. Everyone else was rolling their eyes and shifting uncomfortably because they had once again seen a silly ritual that they didn't think mattered worth a hill of beans. So I watched the 3 winners and I said to myself, I'm going to go follow them. I'm going to follow them and find out the fate of all 3 of those hams. And I did. And when the meeting was over, I chased them down and I found out what happened to those hams. And when I did, I went to the president's office and I did my job and I looked down at him and I said, I need to talk to you. I need to show you something. Would you just come with me for a minute? And he reluctantly got up and he followed me. I took him outside. I walked around his building, went to the back, and in the back there was, predictably, a large industrial-sized dumpster. I opened up the dumpster and asked him to look inside. And what you would predict was right there. 2 of that day's 3 hams were sitting in the garbage. This guy exploded with emotion that was understandable for a good 3, 4, 5 minutes. Lots of expletives, lots of anger. How dare they not appreciate this kind token that I tried to give them? On and on. And finally, when he got all the emotions out, he turned to me and he said, well, what should I do, Doc? And I did what all great consultants do. I just made something up on the fly. I said, here's what you do. I want you to call a meeting next Tuesday, and you tell everyone in the firm they have to be there. All hands on deck, in the parking lot in front of the building, but you don't tell them why. Tuesday rolls around, 2 o'clock, I want you to get on the roof, and I want you to bring a ham. And when you do, you give the following speech. You look down at the employee base there in the parking lot and you say, guys, I found the hams in the trash. It's okay. I get it. I can't believe it took me this long to get it, but I get it. You don't like hams as much as I do. There won't be any more hams. In fact, I'll bet you guys know each other a lot better than I do. I'll bet you could own this little process a lot more successfully than I could. So I'm going to put together a cross-functional group of you guys, and I'm going to let you own this process. No more hams. So I told him to give this speech. And of course, if you're going to give an audacious speech like that, you need to end it audaciously. So I told him to chuck the ham right off the roof at the end of this, just to put a real period at the end of the sentence. So I told him to do this. He looked at me thoughtfully and collected his thoughts for just a second, looked me right in the eye, and he said, I'm paying you how much? Never forget that. But this time he took me seriously, and he actually called the meeting. Tuesday, 2 o'clock, hundreds of people in the parking lot. He got in the roof. He gave the speech. He chucked the ham. How do you think everyone reacted? There was a shared positive outpouring of support and camaraderie, the likes of which this company had never experienced before. Instantly, this became a part of the cultural fabric of the firm. In an instant, thanks to a few small words and a ham flying off the roof, this group of hundreds of employees saw the president, the man on the roof, change from being a removed from them leader to becoming a part of the team in an instant. Next big, huge quarterly meeting rolls around, president gets on stage, and he gives the tap dance with numbers and customers and margins and so on. And when he's done, he says, as you know, there's no more hams, and everyone laughs. He sits down, and the team he had put together comes up to administer the yearly awards for the high performers. This time, they gave out the criteria very clearly, then they gave out the rewards, and the rewards were just trinkets from a corporate catalog. I didn't think they were that inspiring. But I have to ask you, and this is the important part, do you think that what they did was received by the audience far better than the ham scheme was received? The answer is an emphatic yes. Not because what they came up with was genius, it wasn't. It's because what they came up with was theirs. The employees owned this, and that matters. So that after the meeting was over, people were not making ham jokes. I went to the water cooler, the picnic table, and the smoke break area. No one's making ham jokes. They're talking about how they're going to tweak this thing and make it better next time. That's the power of seeing people as individuals. If you want to understand what it means to motivate them, sometimes you have to see individuals and you have to give them some autonomy. That's the end of the story. So you see my point. I could talk about research and quote you the studies on employee motivation, and maybe you'd learn something, definitely you'd be bored, or I could tell you a colorful story with an interesting cast of characters and a lot of dynamic stuff going on about a man and his crazy love of ham. Which one do you think is going to stick in people's memories better? Next time you want to sit down and really get your team to listen to you, think about making the facts and figures step 2. Step 1 is that vehicle like a story that'll grab their attention and actually stick in their memory.